Welcome to the Conquer Food podcast with Craig and Paula Williams, where we share tips, tricks and strategies from the coalface of the weight loss industry in the UK. We're going to help you to think, eat and move better. Ultimately, we're going to help you finally gain control and conquer food. I hope everybody, welcome to the Conquer Food podcast. I'm going to start off today by just throwing a statement out there and kind of see who wants to buy into this. So what if I suggested that doing 6 easy to apply short daily habits could lead to 37% more success, 3 times more creativity, 31% more productivity, up to 10 times more engaged, 19% more accurate, and 23% fewer fatigue symptoms. I think listening to those percentages. I think we'd all be queuing up for those kind of results. So my guest today is Phil Quirk of PQ Performance, who is human performance specialist, and is going to talk to us today primarily about a recent presentation that he's done and how it came about. He was kind enough to share this presentation with me to pass on to you guys. Links for the full presentation you'll find in the description. And I just had to get him on to talk about it. So good morning, Phil. Is it morning? Yeah, it's just about morning. How are you doing?
Yeah, good mate. How are you, Craig?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. So I think it'd be good to get started by kind of just talking a little bit about how you are, a couple of minutes, and then we'll kind of get stuck into how the presentation that you've called the Happy Chappy Guide came about.
Yeah. So I suppose as a ultra fast synopsis, heavily influenced by military career, similar to yourself. The difference being I spent 6 years in one service and then 6 years in the other. So I kind of split my 12 years half and half between the Royal Marines first, before leaving the Royal Marines, going outside for a couple of years. And then I rejoined the RAF as a physical training instructor. And in doing that role, fell into the kind of the mental preparation as opposed to the physical preparation. So looking at the top 3 inches as opposed to sort of neck downwards preparation of guys in the RAF. And immediately was so fascinated with that area that became my sole focus of attention. From there, started my first business with the other Phil Kelly in 2014, which was HBP training originally, and then that evolved into ProNoc this before I left. About 6 months before 6 or 7 months before coronavirus hit, started my own business, which was PQ Performance, which was effectively just really following my passions, which were NLP, hypnosis and coaching, and how you could look at these elements to improve human performance. And that's where I kind of find myself now. So
yesterday, they reported that we had the greatest number of deaths since in a 24-hour period since the pandemic began.
Yep.
Pretty scary times, if I can throw that out there. And during this pandemic, you've created this presentation. Can you just talk to us about like how it came about, why you felt there was a need for this, and and who it's for, really?
Yeah. So it was, as the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. When the pandemic hit in sort of February, March last year, I was out in Barcelona with my fiance Ruth, who the courses that we run out in Barcelona from the villa that we hire. She is also like head of operations for PQ Performance, but she's also the chef. And we were kind of out there, and one of the courses we were running was kind of falling apart at the seams as everything was unraveling back in the UK. And we had to abandon the course 2 or 3 days before the finish to get back to the UK before the borders closed. Now, at this point, me and Ruth were both very relaxed, not being dismissive of what was going on. We absolutely understood that there was a respiratory virus that was in circulation, and we didn't dismiss it and say, it's a load of nonsense. But what we weren't was really that alarmed by the situation. And what happened when we got back, because for some of you, I know that some of your guys know Ruth. Ruth's got a rare form of cancer, a rare leukemia, and although it's managed effectively with a medication, and we live our life completely normally with it, or as normally as you can do, she's obviously in the high risk category for COVID. So when we got back to the UK in sort of mid-March or whenever it was, immediately we started to get letters from the NHS about the dangers and the threats and how she was in the high risk category. And these letters were written in a way that were obviously designed to, make the person sit up reading it to understand the dangers. But there's a kind of a sort of a balance in it. It's almost like blowing a balloon up, that if you put too much into it, the balloon pops. And I think what was happening is, as Ruth was reading these letters that were arriving every few weeks, as well as the combination of that and watching the news, which I think was hugely contributing to the situation, her normally effervescent personality, which is so cheerful and bubbly and positive in the face of any kind of adversity, usually, had kind of evaporated completely. And she was very afraid. She was hugely scared of going outside, to the point where I would say it was near agoraphobia. When I went to the shops, because I came back with shopping, I had to put all the shopping bags at the bottom of the stairs. I'd have to, get out and warm my clothes, get washed. At some point it would even get showered, and disinfect all of the stuff that we bring into the house, mail, food, everything that came into the house was disinfected. And Ruth wouldn't go outside. And I was kind of watching this unfold, and then me and Ruth started to chat about it and say, look, this is affecting your mental health. This is having a really profound effect, more so than I could have ever imagined. And actually, the Happy Chappy Guide was born out of this necessity that we needed to look at our daily habits and behaviors. And what I realized is that the very things that we were doing, which often happens, it's a paradox of crisis, that the behaviors that people engage in are usually the ones that are not contributing. In fact, probably the opposite, are contributing to the down or the decline of someone's mental health. So we changed our behaviors, we changed our habits, we looked at the way we were living, we looked at what we were doing day to day. That had a hugely positive effect on Ruth. And out of there, I kind of started developing the Happy Chappy Guide. First of all, a 1-hour presentation, but later that evolved into now it's a 1-day workshop, which I deliver to businesses now.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to that. There's a lot of people, especially in the first lockdown, a lot of people running around scared and nervous. I mean, even members of my own family, my young lad, he was really nervous. Paula, believe it or not, she's over 50, and she was really nervous. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I remember talking to a few people saying they'd come back from the shop, they'd get in the garage, get changed. And so I kind of realised that. Do you think it's easing off a little bit now? Do you think times are kind of changing a little bit, or?
I think it is. I think humans, by their very nature, we don't deal with uncertainty very well at all. So not knowing is not something that humans enjoy at all. So not knowing what's going to happen around the corner, and that's why if you go on a 6-day course, you sit in the same seat every day, because that's the seat of certainty, isn't it? The other seats are uncertain because you've not tested them, you're not safe in them. So I think that the uncertainty was a huge contributing factor. Generally, there was I've been using lots of analogies with the Happy Chappy Guy, which I think has helped. And so, for instance, one of them is that your mind is like your body. If you exercise your mind, if you take it to the mind gym, so to speak, then it develops strength, it develops resilience, and when you need it, it's there. If you think about, say, for instance, committing to doing an Ironman triathlon, there are very few people that would be able to just go and do an Ironman triathlon. No training, I'll just go and do it. I'll turn up on the day with my bike and my swimming trunks, and I'll just knock it out of the park. Not many people would be able to do that. There was literally probably a handful that would have that physical capability and that mental resolve to be able to get round. What happened at the start of lockdown is the whole nation, and then I suppose really maybe even the whole world, but we just talk about our nation. The whole nation got put on the start line of a mental Ironman, and not many people had done any training for it. And what they found was that the conditions of lockdown, the conditions of coronavirus, exposed fragilities in their mindset that they hadn't perceived because they hadn't been in a position where their mindset had been tested in so much as the position they found themselves in last March. So I think that was a big factor. I think, a lot of the people I coached were young, healthy, fit people that were not in the risk category for should they get coronavirus. So the fear wasn't even so much perhaps the virus for some people. It was the isolation, the disconnection from other humans, the living in an apartment with no garden, and you're in a one-bedroom apartment, you live alone, and usually you live a very highly socially active life. Suddenly you're now confined with only your own thoughts. So it's a time like no other, perhaps, which is why we've experienced such a varying degree of results for people.
So, and this is kind of a bit of a loaded question, but the obvious or the default answer would be, well, you've just got to have a positive mental attitude. This thing that they pumped out in the 80s or whatever. PMA. Yeah. Pick yourself up, be happy. Let's get on with it, and stiff upper British lip. Let's go for it. And what's your take on that?
Yeah. I mean, the world's full of well-intentioned good advice, but with no substance behind it. If someone says that, someone says to you just need to have a positive mental attitude, and if you're not feeling great, if you're in a really bad place, if you're in a rut, someone saying to you, you just have to have a positive mental attitude. That's like saying to a fish to concentrate on water when it's out, when it's on the side flapping around and it's gasping to get back in the water. Just focus on the water. Just think about the water. You'll be fine. It just doesn't cut, does it? It just doesn't cut. And what is well is I think that people, I don't know whether they get almost like this kind of throwaway advice. People become very sort of, well, what do I do then? I just have a positive mental attitude. Okay, great. I'm all ears. Run me through it. How do I do this? And that tends to be where the advice finishes. It tends to, it just has this almost feel of like, a meme off social media, which someone's read. Now, some of the Happy Chappy Guide was actually born out of one of the jobs that I used to do when I left the military. I used to work at a place called Battleback, which is an incredible place at Lilleshall, funded by the British Legion. It's run by Leeds Beckett University. And I was a coach there working with guys in the military, wounded, injured and sick servicemen and women obviously that had been injured or had any sort of long-term injury or illness. And you couldn't just tell those guys, just be positive. There were people that I worked with there that had lost limbs, for instance, in theatre, and you can't just say to them, you just have a positive mental attitude, you'll be right. Saying that to someone like that, it doesn't work. So what we had to do at Battleback, which I then brought into the Happy Chappy Guide, is, well, we need to back it up with a little bit of science. It doesn't need to be academic, this presentation, and the Happy Chappy Guide, by the very nature of the title, as you can tell, is not academic in so much that it's not about that. It's about giving someone some really good strategies and behaviors and habits that they can implement, teaching them why it's useful, and also, using analogies and different ways to explain the science that supports it. So as an example of this within the Happy Chappy Guide, lots of people, I think, understand that doing a gratitude log is a useful thing. If I do my gratitude log, so each day I look for some things to be grateful for, and then I write them down at the end of the day, and then that's a good process. But what we do with the Happy Chappy Guide, which I kind of pinch from Battleback, is to be really honest, is we use a model called RAS, the reticular activating system, explained in an analogy using Google to help people understand why, if they were to do a gratitude log, why that would affect their mindset in a positive way. So suddenly it's not just do this because it's good. It's do this because it's good because of this, and I'll explain it in this way. And that's kind of what the Happy Chappy Guide is. It's science condensed down to be able to be easily understood and then applied, which is what we need today. I think we don't need academic presentations, which are really, really great from an academic point of view. We need presentations and ideas and habits and behaviors that people can identify with, understand, and implement.
So in the guide, you give like 6 ways that you can, dramatically improve your current mindset and all this kind of stuff. But let's just talk about like, what is as in the biological and psychological benefit of it? What kind of happens inside the brain and the body?
Well, so 6 of them they're all individual habits, and often they're things that people know are good to do. But this is kind of like one of the things that I've pinched so many sayings of you. I'm like a Craig Williams phrase thief. I am. Information is not the problem with the world. Implementation is the problem. So it's about easy to apply habits, but it's not necessarily that these habits are unknown. So, for instance, mindfulness is one of the 6. 10 minutes of mindfulness every day hugely helps your mental well-being. People know that intuitively. People understand that if they sit quietly with their thoughts for 10 minutes and focus on the senses and what's going on around, and maybe even just stick on Headspace and listen to Andy, that helps them every day. But what happens with people, myself included, when we go into times of crisis or when we go into times of busyness, we sacrifice the behaviors that help us. We engage with the ones that aren't helpful. And the example I'll give you, which is me, is I've actually, I'm not afraid to admit that I've struggled in the last sort of year for various reasons, not necessarily linked to COVID, other contributing factors. One of the things that I do when I'm not in the best place, I drink more than I would usually because I really love a beer and a glass of wine. But that isn't helpful because what it does is A, it's a depressant, and B, it prevents me from getting the quality, restorative, deep NREM sleep that I need for my brain to be able to administer and service itself on a day-to-day basis. The other way is, the other example with me specifically is breath work is a huge passion of mine. And since New Year, I've been doing breath work every morning. My well-being has improved, my mindset has improved, my focus, everything is benefiting from me committing to doing, half an hour, 45 minutes of breath work in the morning. But I hadn't done it for 6 months before New Year. So for 6 months, I'd not done it once. Even though I know without any uncertainty the benefits of doing it. And I think that's kind of, it's a humanistic nature thing. I think many of us are guilty of this, that the times when we should start to do the good behaviors are usually the times we unfortunately engage in the less good or the bad behaviors. So the 6 habits are really easy to implement. They're not unknown habits. The 2 that I would say to anyone, if I was to give just 2 tips to improve your mental well-being, in these times specifically, turn off the news, and I'll use an analogy to explain that, and really, really address sleep hygiene. For instance, alcohol, and I'm sure I know you talk about sleep a lot at boot camp, so your guys will, I'm sure, be more educated than many. Alcohol represses your ability to get the really deep restorative sleep. So a lot of people, when they're stressed out, they drink, me included, they drink perhaps more wine and more beer than they would normally. But what they don't realize is that might help them sleep as in their eyes are closed, but it does not support deep restorative sleep. And actually, that's why when you've got, you've been out and you've had a skinful of drink and you might have slept for 12 hours, you wake up the next day and you're still absolutely shattered all day. It's because you haven't had the proper and deep sleep that you need. And then the news, the analogy that I've been using doing the Happy Chappy Guide, which it seems to have resonated with lots of people that have attended the workshops, is and it's an analogy comparing with eating. So, perhaps will resonate with certainly your community of Conquer Foodies. When you eat food, you experience the taste and the texture of the food in your mouth. You're aware of it. It has an awareness element. When you swallow the food and you start the digestion process, that sits outside of your awareness. And unless you've got a little bit of indigestion, you won't be aware of that at all. That will all happen, I suppose, at a level beneath your consciousness, beneath your awareness. But it's still happening. Now, if I eat a terrible diet, if I eat, just terrible food nonstop, I might enjoy the taste of that because it's the nature of unhealthy food sometimes. But I know that everything that happens after my sensory experience in my mouth is going to be negative. Now, if your stomach is a consumer of nutrients, your subconscious brain is a consumer of information in exactly the same way. So I watch the news. I'm glued to the news because I'm so curious about what's going on. But what I'm not realizing is I'm cramming my subconscious with bad news, with coronavirus, with those really aggressive zoomed in pictures of the virus, which personifies it and brings it to life and gives it a face for me to identify with. And that will have a huge effect on your mindset and your well-being, an absolutely transformational effect for the worse. And the first thing that we did with myself and Ruth was switch the news off. You're going to find out what's going on. You don't need to worry about watching Sky News, day in, day out. The amount of people that I've spoken to, Craig, and coached over the last year, and one of the factors that's consistent in all the people that I've spoke to that have struggled is they've become addicted to watching the news or watching social media updates. So that tells you straight away there's this symptomatic cause and effect going on there.
Mm. Yeah, I know, and we kind of got sucked into it early on. The Prime Minister's daily updates, and it became a regular thing where we would get our dinner, and okay, we'll sit down and watch the update, and we recognised that I don't know what's going on the phone there. We were getting a ton of fear, and we had to call it a day, to the point where I was like, right, that's it, no more news from me. I'm going to take in what's going on by what is directly around me, and sometimes, I was a little bit cut off, but I certainly felt better. I was definitely in a better place. So you mentioned like the two main. We won't go through them all in the interest of time, and obviously people can watch the presentation and get a bit of and get more information. But you mentioned two. So we talked about the news, and then with the sleep. What are a couple of things that people can do and to increase the quality of that sleep?
Well, sleep for me is the number one performance enhancing game you can get legally without taking any illegal enhancement. It is transformational on well-being and on performance. So there are simple things that people, I don't think, get right with sleep. So for 3 or 4 habits which contribute towards your sleep hygiene can transform your sleep completely. So the first one is going to bed and waking up at the same time. When you're awake, you have what's called an ultradian rhythm. When you're asleep, you have a circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm, it governs your flow from shallow, light, restless sleep into REM, so rapid eye movement sleep, into the deeper NREM sleep, and then back out the other side. And you kind of come up and down from this at this depth of sleep. Going to bed and waking up at the same time is the biggest enhancer of sleep hygiene, without a doubt. Two of the worst inventions that were ever made from a sleep perspective were alarm clocks and lights. Both of those are destructive for our natural sleep patterns. What you find if you go to bed at the same time, even say for instance you set an alarm, if you were to maintain that for 1 or 2 weeks, always going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, within reason, within a sort of a parameter bracket, you'll find you'll just start to wake up naturally. You'll get the right circadian rhythms. And as most people have found, if you wake up at, say, for instance, 5:30 in the morning and you're kind of wide awake, but you don't need to get up till 7. So you think, do you know what, I'll go back and I'll get another hour's sleep. And you wake up again and you're absolutely shattered. And the reason for that is, the first time you woke up, you've come naturally out of a circadian rhythm. And the next time your alarm clock has woke you within that circadian rhythm, so you're not completing the whole cycle. So going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, even Saturday and Sunday, your nervous system doesn't care about Sunday lines. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So it's maintaining that discipline, and that can be a loose bracket. So, for instance, going to bed between 10:30 and 11, with a view to waking up between 6:30 and 7, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go on, carry on.
Carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that with lockdown, I think it just became, for some people, it just became an eternal weekend, didn't it? Every day was like a weekend. So we'll just have a lie in, and even Paula at times has sort of said, she's been up late tonight, and I'm like, right, we're going to go to bed, and we usually have a pretty strict bedtime. She's like, well, what's the point? We don't have to get up for. And I'm like, well, yeah, there's everything to get up for. You know what I mean? It's maintaining that routine to make sure that you are fresh, because it affects so many different things.
Yeah, and if you're not careful, you kind of develop this sort of lethargy and apathy, don't you? That can it can be well nurtured in the conditions of lockdown. I think that kind of lethargy and apathy come in. I since New Year have got up at 5 to 6 every morning. My alarm goes off. I do stay in bed for an extra sort of half an hour, 45 minutes on a Saturday and Sunday, but not. I don't stay in bed for sort of like 9, 10 o'clock. And I'm finding now, because my circadian rhythm's been all over the place for the previous 5 months, because I was on the Isle of Man with in the opposite problem, no restrictions. So going out and enjoying and having lots of nights out with friends and getting drunk a lot of time, never really going to bed at the same time, never waking up at the same time, and quite often having alcohol in the system. So I wouldn't have been getting quality sleep throughout that whole period. And now we get to January the 1st, and obviously everyone starts the new year with good intentions. Myself and Ruth kind of said, like, no drinking. Let's be a little bit more disciplined, especially as we know what happened last time. And it's certainly helpful. So going to bed and waking up is a big thing. And then two quite easy to implement habits with sleep as well is you want the room cold. So the humans are addicted. I always say there are two addictions that we have as humans that sit outside of like the traditional alcohol and tobacco and stuff like that. We're addicted to comfort, and we're addicted to abundance. If anyone thinks we're not addicted to abundance, have a look at Amazon's stock market share. Yeah. And comfort is a huge addiction of humans. So we really love to be comfortable. We really love to bend and shape our environment to fit our parameters of comfort. Now, when you go to bed, you want the room cold enough that it's actually uncomfortable to stand in say, for instance, in your underpants. If you're going to bed, you actually want to be sort of wanting to jump in bed because it's too cold to be out of the bed. And that's kind of like the sort of temperatures rule of thumb. We sleep much better with cold room. That's because it's an evolutionary thing that, before we had houses, the temperature would naturally drop as we went into the night. As the sun went down, we would lose a lot of temperature quickly. The light would go quickly, which is going to be my next point. That would trigger the melatonin for us to go to sleep, and we'd be really, really tired and we'd sleep. That's why people sleep really well when they go camping. It gets cold and it gets dark really, really quickly. So a cold room, and then the second point which connects to that is the room as dark as possible. And when I say that, if you can get kind of these heavy duty blackout blinds that completely make your room as dark as you can get it, that's exactly what you want. Because excuse me, once again, just from an evolutionary perspective, the loss of light leads to the melatonin release, which then makes us drowsy, which then puts us to sleep. What we have now, though, is we live in this hyper-stimulated world where we've got light around us all the time. And even, obviously the really sort of guilty part with that is things like phones and iPads, with blue light before you go to sleep. So having that kind of discipline with just some few easy to implement habits will transform your sleep really, really quickly. Yeah,
it's good. So the presentation, there'll be links, like I said, in the description below. What other stuff are you up to at the minute, Phil? I mean, you got what else you?
Well, I'm writing my book, as you know, which is I've been talking about writing a book for about 4 years now. So I've actually written like 3 or 4 books conversationally with people about different ideas, but never actually committed anything to a piece of paper before, which is one of my character traits, or some people would say character flaws as well. But I'm actually getting my teeth really into it. I'm 25,000 words in. I think it's going to be between 50 and 60,000 words. And the book they're all short chapters. Every chapter is no more than 500 words. I think I've written 57 chapters so far, and there's only one that's gone slightly over 500 words.
Well, big thank you there to Phil for joining us on the Conquer Food podcast. I'm going to save the little bit about the book for another episode. I'm going to definitely get him on to talk about that, and also his fiancée Ruth, who's got an incredible story, battling leukemia and just living life to the full every day. So you can look forward to that future. If you've got anything of benefit from this podcast, I really encourage you to, 1, share it with other people that you think will get some benefit from it, and 2, leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to us on. That really does help other people find it and lets us know that we're on the right track. And like I said, the final thing I'd ask you to do is just check out the links below with Phil's The Happy Chappy Guide, where you really can start to implement these 6 really easy things to combat a lot of the fear, a lot of the worry, the depression that we are perhaps all experiencing during this pandemic. So until the next podcast, take care.